Okay, so this is going to be the last chapter in the Let's Get to Know the Top episodes. And that's not saying I'm not going to tell more stories, because God knows I've got a lot to say. I'm just going to sort of close this up after this episode, and we're going to move forward. So sit back, relax, and get ready, in one way or another, to get your dork on.
The Top, broadcasting live to at least 3 people on Spreaker.com. I never talk to strangers unless they're hot. The Ice Cream Man is evil. Justin Bieber was sent to this planet to destroy the minds of teenage girls. When my hand falls asleep, I like to slap myself in the face with it because it feels like a stranger is attacking me. And I happen to love ponies as well. So, do you want a date?
Take it from the top.
Mr. Pop.
Dorks of the world, unite. No, okay, listen closely. It's not WOBA, it's WABA.
Take it from the top.
Mr.
Take it from the top.
This is the Chris Top Program, broadcasting worldwide to at least 3 people.
And I am the one and only Chris Top, broadcasting live from my lavish studio apartment here in sunny Clarksville, Tennessee, with an ocean view. So here we are again. This is the 4th show of the day, but it's only 2 hours of broadcasting. I did one earlier today. If you missed that, go back and check it out. And this is the 3rd show of the evening, the final show of the evening. I thought, well, while we're at it, let's go ahead and peel back some more layers. Let's go ahead and get really personal. In order for me, and I brought this up the other day, in order for me to get invited into your homes, to spend time with you here and there, at 30 minutes at a time, an hour, whatever I decide to do, in order for me to be welcomed into your home or to ride with you to work in the car, I want you to know who I am and what I'm about, where I came from, what made me the person that I am. And you're going to hear all the dorky stories. You're going to hear things in future broadcasts, I promise you. But right now, we're in the getting to know each other stage. And I've never done back-to-back shows like this before. And it's kind of like therapy, I've got to say. I've seen a psychiatrist, and in the movies, you go in, you see the psychiatrist, you lay down on the couch, and the first thing the shrink asks you is, okay, tell me about your childhood. And that's in the movies. That don't happen in real life. I walk in, and I pick a chick psychiatrist just because I felt more comfortable, I think, around a chick. So I walk in, and there's a couch, and jokingly I said, okay, am I supposed to lie down? And she says, if you want to. Most people don't. So I sat up, and what do you think the very first thing she asked me was? She said, tell me about your childhood. I'm like, really? You want to know about my childhood? Are you for real? And psychiatrists really do that. Or maybe she just saw the same movies that I saw. I don't know. So I start telling her about my father. And I start to cry like a little girl. The man died when I was 8 years old, so I don't... It's been a long time since I've cried over that. So I'm sitting there in her office, and I'm bawling nonstop. And for a little while, there's reservations. I'm a little nervous about crying around this strange woman. This is my first day seeing the psychiatrist. She hands me a bunch of napkins, Kleenexes, and I make it through it, and I think I ain't going back ever. But I ended up going back quite a few times. And this is weird, but I mean, I think the roles reversed there for a while, and if anybody else has ever been to a psychiatrist, let me know if this happened to you. So eventually she starts telling me her life story, and she starts bawling too. So I don't know if grown men typically break down in her office or not, but it was a pretty weird situation. But I did feel more comfortable with her and talking to her. I probably should have went more, just because I know how I am. And the whole reason I went in the first place was because I was trying at the time to save my marriage. We'd kind of gotten past the point of, well, let's try counseling. And I thought, well, I'm going to go to the psychiatrist and maybe try to fix what's wrong with me. But it didn't help. And that's all water under the bridge now, whatever. So anyway, the point I'm getting to is I'm going to tell you about a darker moment in my life, and I feel like we've shared a lot. We've talked about some happy stuff. We threw a little bit of inspiration in there. Now it's, I think, time to talk about the darker side. And there's nothing wrong with that, because every experience a person has makes them who they are. Now, who you become, who you decide to be, isn't based on where you've been, though. It's based on where you plan on going. It's based on what you do from this point on. And if you didn't know, that's great advice. So if there's something in your life that's happened that you don't like, or you felt like maybe you were dealt a dirty hand, screw it. It doesn't matter anymore because it happened yesterday or last week or last year or 10 minutes ago. The person you are starts right now. The person that you want to become starts this second. All you have to do is make the decisions. All you have to do is be that person. You can do whatever the hell you want. And don't limit yourself. Don't listen to people that say, no, you can't do that. Just do what you're supposed to do. Just get married by the time you're 20, have a bunch of kids by the time you're 25, get a job at a factory, do this, do that. If that's not what you want to do, then don't do it. Put your life in a different direction. Shake things up a little bit. Be inspiring to other people. Have those people look at you that said, no, you can't do that. That's not the normal thing to do. Make those people look at you and be surprised. Make those people look at you and say, whoa, this guy or this girl proved me wrong. You can do it. You just have to start making decisions in that direction. You may not be able to do it overnight, but you can get there. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about being awesome. I'm talking about working on being awesome, working toward it just a little bit at a time. You may or may not get there, but if you make it halfway, then that's pretty good. All right. Before I get into this story, I want to share something with you that I came across on the internet, and this made me this made me think very deeply about how things could have went, because I remember living in this time in my life and thinking, wow, this there was a lot of tension, and I wonder how things could have went had they went the other way. Well, I guess Queen Elizabeth had to prepare for that. Now, there's usually a plan B for most situations in life. Well, there was a speech that the Queen of England had actually prepared had there been a nuclear war in 1983. So I guess she had to prepare either way, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't have a crystal ball. So documents revealed Thursday show this statement in very grim glory. And this is what she said. After some warm chit-chat about Christmas, Her Royal Highness acknowledges the enemy is the deadly, and this is a quote, is the deadly power of abused technology. And then she adds these words: help those who cannot help themselves. Give comfort to the lonely and the homeless. And let your family become the focus of hope and life to those who need it. And I guess what all this meant was there's not a whole lot we can do when the bombs start falling. So hold on to your loved ones and say goodbye. Now, I want you to take it out of context. I want you to take what the Queen of England said out of context. Why can't we live like this every day? I mean, the best way to become a better person is to help other people. The best way to get that first kiss moment, the best way to have a first kiss moment is to help somebody else, right? So why can't we live like this every day? Why do we have to wait for things to get so bad that we wake up and decide to do it just because, well, there's not much else we can do? You know, there's no hope left, so it's time to pray. It's time to help other people, because that's what you do when everything's over. So why do you have to wait for things to get bad? Why can't you help those who cannot help themselves right now? Why can't we give comfort to the lonely and the homeless right now? Why can't your family become the focus of hope and life to those who need it? And nobody has a perfect situation. Nobody has a perfect family, but your actions are going to speak very loudly to someone that's in need of something or someone that's paying attention to you. And what an honor that would be if you and your family were the focus of hope and life to those who need it. These are some of the greatest words that that we never heard. And I'm glad it didn't go that way. I'm glad we didn't have to hear them. But it's nice to hear them after the fact. And maybe we can learn from it and use it in our day-to-day lives. We don't have to wait for things to get so bleak. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you, and I guess that's a good lead-in for the story that I'm about to tell. So here we go. I'm going to say hello to everybody that's in the chat, and thank you guys so much for having the patience with me and for coming back into the chat, even though I keep having to leave after 30 minutes and come back. And I thank you guys so much, really. But I want to say hi to Lisa that came back. I want to say hi to Lisa's brother that's listening as well. We've got PS Infinity Radio that's in the chat. Hello and Waba to you, PS Infinity Radio. Okay, so Lisa's brother's name is Matt. Matt, it is a pleasure to meet you. I'm Chris Topp. If you were here, I would shake your hand. Chaz says, now, Chris, I must know, is your Facebook page linked to your Twitter, or are you just that good at posting things at the same time? You know, I suck at multitasking, Chaz. I do. So I've linked everything. I have. See, what I'll do is I'll get on... I'll say what I say on Spreaker, and then it'll tweet it to my personal Facebook, and then I'll get on Facebook and I'll type it in, and it'll tweet it. So that way I don't have double tweets, so I've kind of got everything linked, kind of, sort of. Chaz says he's always Waba-ing. And Holly, I want to say this to you. I'm sure that you have some awesome stories in your life. You just have to... Sometimes you don't realize them. Sometimes you don't know that they're awesome stories until you sit back and think about it. I just want to tell Holly that. She says, I feel like a doofus. I didn't know this was on. I should have been paying attention instead of screwing around online. Well, you didn't really miss anything. And the crazy old man says, he says, is this the real Chris Top? So I have something to say. What I would like to know is, will the real Chris Top please stand up? The crazy old man says, I was supposed to die 2 years ago. God let me live. I always try to help others. Helping others helps yourself. And that doesn't sound too crazy to me. Those sound like words of wisdom to me. Now, here we go. And once again, you don't have to really talk in the chat. And normally I won't ever say that because I love the interaction. I love being able to communicate with you guys, to respond to what you say. But again, this is one of those stories that, okay, this isn't like the Firefly story. If you want to chat, you can. Go ahead and I'll respond. Let me get a drink of my delicious Mountain Dew. I'll tell you, well, here, let me just take a quick break, and we'll come back, and I'm going to tell you this story. And it's probably going to be a tearjerker. It's a real life story, and when I tell you a real life story, it's a real life story. All right, I might put a little extra something in every once in a while, and usually that's in the funny stories. But this next one I'm going to tell you, it's pretty real, and it really does take a lot for me to share this with you. So. I'm going to ask you a favor. I'm going to ask you to have patience with me if I can't get through it. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try to hold my composure the best I can. But it's a little difficult. But again, I want you to know who I am, and I want to peel back the layers, because if you're going to let me into your life, then you need to know these things about me, because I want us to be on that level. I do. So, you're absolutely positively in the right place. This, my friends, is the Chris Top program. I'm the one and only Chris Top, the self-proclaimed leader of all dorks, and I will be back momentarily.
Holly Stallin's words cut like a double-edged sword. On the Edge with Holly Stallin, the fastest 30 minutes on Spreaker.com.
That's Holly Stallin. She's in the chat. You can click on her, give her a follow right now. And, of course, click on me. Follow my show, The Chris Top Program.
Take it from the top.
Mr. Pop.
Dorks of the world, unite. No, okay, listen closely. It's not WOBA, it's WABA.
Take it from the top.
Mr. Pop.
And I am the one and only Chris Top from The Chris Top Program, taking that milk money back one nickel at a time. You know, one of the most heart-wrenching things that can happen to you is when someone in your life leaves you and you don't have the opportunity to say goodbye. How many times have you been faced with that? When you've been put in the situation where somebody one day is with you, the next day they're gone, and you didn't have a chance to say goodbye to them. If you could just go back and get that opportunity, I mean, how would you do things differently? If you could have an extra 5 minutes, an extra 10 minutes, just to tell them what you thought, just to tell them what you needed to say to get it out of your system. I was 8 years old. And you know where I grew up. I grew up on a farm. My father worked all the time. All the time. I don't have too many memories of him. I remember us playing basketball. I remember him taking me to Cub Scout meetings. I remember him being as tall as a giant. I believe the man was 6'2". And I learned later on that he was very well liked in the community. People respected this man. Not because of what he did for a living. He was the groundskeeper at a golf course. But he was up every day. He worked hard every day at the golf course. He came home. He worked hard to keep the house up, to keep the lawn looking good, to keep the garden going. We didn't have we didn't have the central air and heat, or so we had to cut wood to stay warm. He never stopped. He never stopped a day in his life, and he is probably by far the most impressive man that I barely know. So there was one particular weekend that I had an opportunity to go over and stay the night at my best friend's house. His name was Billy, and he actually just lived right down the road. And, in this particular time, I didn't even have to beg my mother to let me go. She just asked me, she said, "Hey, do you want to go to Billy's house for the night?" And I was all about it, because rarely did I get to go and hang out without having to beg and scream and stuff. So she let me go over to Billy's house. And, we hung out, we had a good time, we played, we made noise, we broke things. I was so clumsy as a young kid. And it seems like I broke so many things when I went over to Billy's house. I mean, you could tell when I had been there, because something would be missing because they had to throw it away because I broke it. I was known as a very, very clumsy child. So I spent the night, and then the next day rolls around, and I'm a little discouraged because I know that sometime during the late morning, my mom's going to call, and she's going to say, "Well, come on home." And I could easily walk home. I mean, it was maybe a mile and a half away down this dirt road that we lived on, and the whole neighborhood was on this road. It was called Mellon Road. We actually lived in the Mellon house. They were the first ones, I guess, on the road. And my dad had actually bought the house from them. So I expected a phone call the next morning. My mom saying, "Chris, it's time to come home." So I don't know what time it was, but I remember the phone ringing. And Billy's mom answered, and it was my mother. And I don't remember exactly the look on her face, but I could imagine it wasn't good. So she got off the phone with my mom, and she says, "Hey, Chris, how would you like to stay another night?" Well, I didn't rationalize things because I had the opportunity to stay an extra night at my friend's house. So again, I was all about it. It was the coolest thing in the world because I got to stay an extra night with my friend. Why would I turn that down? How could I possibly say no to that? So we had another night where we hung out and stayed up late and did whatever 8, 9-year-old kids do. So the next day rolls around, and I'm waiting for the call again, waiting for my mother to say, "Okay, Chris, it's time to come home." But instead, a car pulls up outside. I don't remember who was driving. It wasn't my brother. He was at home. I remember him being at home when I got there. My mom was sitting in the back seat. There was somebody else in the front seat. I don't remember who that was either. But very vividly, I remember my mother's face. I saw a look on it that I'd never seen before. I knew she was sad, but there was something else too. I knew, and looking back now, I know what it was. She was sad. She knew she had something to tell me that she didn't want to tell me. And she was worried. She was scared. Because from this point on, she's alone. So I sit down beside her in the car, and I put my hand on her leg, and I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" She didn't say a word to me. She just looked straight ahead, and the tears just, they rolled down her face. So I closed the door, not knowing what's going on. And I'll tell you this, guys. If you have a young child, 8 years old, 4 years old, 10, whatever, they understand more than you think they do. So it's okay to tell them things. They're going to get it. You might have to ease them into it. You might have to be careful. But they're going to understand if you take the time to explain something to them. So we drove home. I'm running out of time. We drove home, and there were so many people at my house. There were cars everywhere. There were what seemed like hundreds of people at my home. I get out of the car. I don't know what the hell's going on. I start to walk up toward the house. I'm wondering, where's Dad? My brother walks up. He takes me by the hand. We walk out to the edge of the yard. He asked me to sit down with him. So he sits down on the ground, and I sit on his lap. I didn't see Dad anywhere, so I know at this point what's going on. Of course, I start to cry, and he's crying, and we're rocking back and forth. I know my father's gone. And I found out later that he was in bed with Mom, and he told her that he had a headache. It was getting worse. He better go to the emergency room. And for my dad to say, "Let me go to the doctor," I knew that it had to be bad. And I remember people telling me stories about him, about how he used to play horseshoes and how he used to kick everybody's ass. And he threw them funny. He held them out straight, and he just sort of, it was almost like he slid them onto the pin. I remember those stories, people telling me those, and how great my dad was. And you know, I've always resented my mother for not giving me the opportunity to say goodbye to him. I would have given up in a heartbeat the opportunity to stay the night at my friend's house had I known what was going on. He had a headache, and it ended up being a brain hemorrhage, and he died. But I would have had time to go and see him, and I would have had time to say goodbye. And I have a hard time with that. And when I think about the passing of my father, I think about missing that opportunity just because the adults felt like they knew better. Like I wouldn't understand, like I wouldn't get it. So give your kids a little credit. I mean, if something like that happens to you, then let them in on it. Just tell them. Tell them what's going on. I do not, nor will I ever take any of you for granted, because there are a million other things you could do, but you choose to listen to me, and that makes me feel wonderful. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I will be back sooner or later, I promise you that, because I am Chris Top. Until I broadcast again, please remember life is good, and I'm gone.
You have been exposed to the Chris Top program. Tune in next,
Yeah, I don't have a schedule.
right.